Welcome to the Laws of Cooking on Shabbat. This will be part 36 of the class. We are in the sefer called Halacha Birura by Rav David Yosef Shlita. Today we're going to see other forms of malachot that which are done on Shabbat if you are allowed to go ahead and benefit from them. Yesh omrim, there are those that say, Shimutar lishtamesh b'davar, you are allowed to use something shenaseh b'isur b'Shabbat, which was done in a prohibited way on Shabbat, kol shehu l'tzorech mitzvah, as long as that thing that you want to use now is for the sake of a mitzvah. Why? Mipanei, because sheyesh lomar, one can say, bazeh, in this situation, mitzvot lav lehenot nitnu, mitzvot were not given for us to benefit from. Vafilu kishe'otam mitzvah midarabanan, and even if that mitzvah is from the rabbis, still we're going to say that mitzvot were not given for us to benefit. Now, what is Rav David Yosef Shlita saying over here? Says Rav David Yosef, we first have to understand the first principle when it comes to doing mitzvot, right? Whenever you do a mitzvah, whenever you put on tefillin, whenever you say a bracha, whenever you give tzedakah, whenever you learn Torah, right? You are doing all of these mitzvot. Now you have to ask yourself, when you do the mitzvot, do you feel good about it? And the answer is yes. So you're going to tell me that when I'm doing the mitzvah, I'm benefiting from the mitzvah. Not necessarily. Yes, you'll feel good by doing it, but mitzvot were not given to us so that we can benefit. It's not chas v'sham like a drug. If you feel down, you go, you do the mitzvah, so now you feel better. No. Mitzvot were decreed upon us from Hashem. We do them, we like it, we don't like it, we got to do them. So therefore, Rabotai, there is a principle in the Gemara, throughout Shas, mitzvot lav lehenot nitu. Mitzvot were not given for us to benefit from them. Mitzvot were given to us because we have to do them. Now you're going to tell me, oh Rabbi, but I do feel good after I do the mitzvah or while I'm doing the mitzvah. I agree. But that's b'derech agav. That's like by the way. But that's not the main reason why you do mitzvot. You do mitzvot because Hashem said so. Now why is that important to know? Point number 2. We have to realize that if a person went there and he did a malacha, a forbidden labor on Shabbat, we know that the halakha states you are not allowed to benefit from that malacha. Benefit. For example, if I went ahead and now I cooked on Shabbat a piece of steak, I'm not allowed to eat that steak because I'm going to get benefit. Says Rav David Yosef, if what you did right now on Shabbat was asur, but that thing you don't need it for yourself, you want to do with it a mitzvah. Mitzvah were not given for you to benefit, so really you're not benefiting from that item. So therefore, says Rav David Yosef Shlita, that's why there are opinions that hold that if a person went ahead and he did a malacha on Shabbat, and because of that malacha something came about, we're going to see, something came about, you are allowed to use it, even though it came about, even though it was produced in a prohibited way, you are allowed to use it only if it's l'tzorech mitzvah. Only if it's for the sake of a mitzvah. Why? Again, because mitzvot were not given for you to benefit. So really, you're not, the malacha was done. Asur, I agree, that's an avera. But now this is what I'm using for the sake of the mitzvah. Since the mitzvot were not given for me to benefit, it's as if I'm not benefiting from the malacha that he did. The whole reason why we're never allowed to go ahead and benefit from malacha, which was done on Shabbat, and we gotta wait until after Shabbat, is because we don't want you to benefit from the malacha itself. But I'm not benefiting from the malacha. Yeah, you're right, in a way I am, but if I'm going to go with the concept that mitzvot were not given to us to benefit from, okay, so a person did the malacha, but since I'm using that thing for a mitzvah purpose, I'll be allowed to do it on Shabbat, meaning I'll be allowed to use it on Shabbat. Continues Rav David Yosef Shlita and he says, V'yesh omrim, and there are those that say, she'av ledavar mitzvah asur. No, some opinions want to learn, no, it's asur. Lishtamesh b'ma'aseh Shabbat. To go ahead and try to use that prohibited labor on Shabbat. But if one wants to be lenient and follow the first opinion, yesh lo amah she'yismoch. He has what to rely on. Rabotai, here we go. Now he's going to give us an example which is going to make us have a better understanding of this halakha. And therefore, if you found a mistake in the Sefer Torah, let's say the letters were touching, or the Vav was a Yud, right? Anything that's going to disqualify the Sefer Torah, what happened, Rabotai? Let's say there was a Sofer over there, or somebody else who did not know the halachot, that you're not allowed to fix the Sefer Torah on Shabbat. He went and he fixed it. Let's say there were two letters touching. He went and he took a knife and scraped off the letters on Shabbat. Says Rav David Yosef, V'tikunu b'Shabbat, and they fixed it on Shabbat. Here we go, Rabotai. The reading of the Sefer Torah, it's a mitzvah to read from it. But I'm not going to go ahead and I'm not really allowed to benefit from the reading. Meaning I'm doing it because Hashem said so. Now, are you allowed to go ahead and are you allowed to use that Sefer Torah even though there was a Maaseh Shabbat done with it, even though there was a prohibited labor that was done on the Sefer Torah itself? Says Rav David, Hamikel likro bo b'Shabbat, one who's going to be lenient to read from the Sefer Torah on Shabbat, yesh lo al mashi yismoch. He has what to rely on. So Rabotai, I hope this gives us a better picture of the halakha. Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, even though, Rabotai, whenever I say Maaseh Shabbat means that I did a prohibited act on Shabbat, and because of that, something else came into being. For example, if I have a raw piece of meat, and I went and I did the Maaseh Shabbat on Shabbat, meaning I desecrated Shabbat by turning on the fire, now I changed the state of the raw meat into edible meat. Can I eat it? Absolutely not, because you're not allowed to benefit from Maaseh Shabbat. You're not allowed to benefit from prohibited labor of Shabbat. That same concept, if you're going to bring it when it comes to doing mitzvot, like in our case, even though it was asur for you to go ahead and erase the Sefer Torah when they were touching, because that's one of the 39 melachot, which is mochek, to erase, you're not allowed to erase it. He went ahead and he did it. He did a malacha. Now, can I still use the Sefer Torah on Shabbat to go ahead and read from it? He says one who's lenient to read from it, he has what to rely on. Why is that? Or how is it possible? He did a malacha. I'm asur. It's asur for me to benefit from malacha that he did on Shabbat. You're right. But if because of that malacha, what he did on Shabbat, which was asur, came out from it something which you're going to use now for a mitzvah purpose, and since mitzvahs were not given for us to benefit, I'm like saying to you, you're not really benefiting from that malacha that he did on Shabbat. So therefore, Rabotai, one more time. And therefore, if you find a mistake in the Sefer Torah, and they fixed it on Shabbat, one who's lenient to read in it, meaning in the Sefer Torah on Shabbat, he has what to rely on. Rabotai, you want to be machmir, you have another Sefer Torah, be my guest. But if you want to read from that Sefer Torah, you have what to rely on. Continues Rav David Yosef Shlita to give us another beautiful example. And so to im ira takala b'ma'arech hachashmal v'tiknuhu b'Shabbat. If you had a power outage on Shabbat and they fixed it on Shabbat for you, a Jew, hamikel lilmod Torah, one who's lenient to learn Torah by that light, or he wants to read Shnai Mikra V'Echad Targum, leor oto hachashmal, to the light of that electricity, yesh lo al mashi yismoch, he has what to rely on. Rabotai, that same principle. V'chen sifrei kodesh shenitfusu b'Shabbat, gives Rav David Yosef Shlita another example. And so too, if you had sifrei kodesh, if you had holy books which were printed on Shabbat, hamikel lilmod bahem yesh lo al mashi yismoch, one who's lenient to learn from them, he has what to rely on. Now, Rabotai, we're going to see what about Maaseh Shabbat shenaseh letzorech hachol. Up to now we were seeing Maseh Shabbat Shenaseh Letzorech Mitzvah, like we explained. Now we want to see what about Maseh Shabbat. What about if a person went ahead and he desecrated Shabbat, he did something on Shabbat, but it was not for the sake of the mitzvah. It was for the sake of the weekday. Says Rav David Yosef, Mi she'asa b'Shabbat, malacha ha'asur min Torah. If someone went ahead and he did on Shabbat a prohibited labor which is asur from the Torah, l'tzorech hachol, but he did this in malacha for the sake of the weekday, for Sunday, for Monday, not for the sake of a mitzvah. Im haya hadavar b'shogeg, if this malacha that he did on Shabbat was an accident, ne'esar oto davar she'na'asa, that things becomes prohibited to use whatever he made on Shabbat, ad achar Shabbat, until after Shabbat. Ben le'oto she'asa ken be'atzmo, whether that person that he did it for himself, or ben la'acherim, or whether for other people. Nobody's allowed to benefit from that thing that came out as a result of Maseh Shabbat, as a result of desecration of Shabbat. V'kedin asa malacha b'Shabbat l'tzorech haShabbat. The same halacha, Rabotai, is going to be that when a person went ahead and he did a malacha on Shabbat for the sake of Shabbat, we explained over there that you're not allowed to use it. For example, if I went ahead and I cooked a raw steak on Shabbat for the sake of the Shabbat, can I use that steak? Absolutely not. I can't have it. Nobody else could have it. After Shabbat, there are different rules like we saw in the previous classes. However, Rabotai, what happens if I wanted to make my life easier? So I wanted to go ahead and I wanted to cook Malav and Malka on Shabbat for after Shabbat, for Moti Shabbat. I did, steak, egg, fries, prepare a whole meal. Am I allowed to go ahead and benefit from that on Shabbat? Absolutely not. You can't benefit from it on Shabbat. You have to wait until after Shabbat. And over there, Rabotai, there are also rules when you're allowed to benefit. Continues Rav David Yosef and he says, V'im haya davar b'meizid. Now what happens if that thing that you did, the malacha, this Maseh Shabbat that you did on Shabbat, if it was done with intention, you knew that it was not allowed to be done, and you knew it was Shabbat, asur oto davar shenasa b'Shabbat, that thing that was done on Shabbat is prohibited le'oto, to that person she'asakin that did so, be'atzmo, by himself, le'olam, forever. Rabotai, if I went ahead on Shabbat and I knew it's not allowed for one to go ahead and cook on Shabbat, and I started a fire and I made the steak, says Rav David Yosef Shlita, since I did a Ma'aseh Shabbat, since I desecrated Shabbat, and I knew it's not allowed, I am never ever allowed to eat from that piece of meat. Not on Shabbat, not after Shabbat, not 300 years later. For me, that thing becomes asur. If I knew it's not allowed to be done and I did it knowingly, I could never benefit from that object which came as a result of a desecration of Shabbat. However, he says, Ula acherim, what about other people? What about my family members? Mutar achar ha-Shabbat. They are allowed to eat it after Shabbat, but not on Shabbat itself. V'im nasa hadavar al yidei Yehudim mechalel Shabbat b'kiviut. What happened, Rabotai, is this thing that came as a result of a desecration of Shabbat. It happened through a Jew that desecrates Shabbat constantly. He doesn't care, Rabotai. And he did so for other people. Ne'esar oto davar, that thing becomes asur, shenasa b'Shabbat, which was done on Shabbat, l'tzorech achar ha-Shabbat, for the sake of after Shabbat, this becomes asur l'olam, forever, af la'acherim, even for other people. Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, if you have a Jew who constantly desecrates Shabbat, you should know if he's doing it for you, even after Shabbat, you're not going to be able to benefit from it. It becomes asur forever and ever. Not only for him, but also for the person that he went ahead and he did it for. Not about time. We're going to go ahead and we're going to speak about what about a situation where you have a cheresh, shote, vikatan. Let's try to go ahead and identify what each one is. So I'll be saying it in Hebrew and you guys will understand what it is in English. A cheresh, Rabotai, is a deaf mute. A shote is a deranged child. Vikatan is a minor. What we're going to see right now is what happens if you had ma'aseh Shabbat shel cheresh, shote, vikatan. You had a child, you had a minor, or a deranged child, or a cheresh, deaf mute. One of them, they went out and they desecrated Shabbat. And because of that desecration, something came as a result. Are you allowed to benefit from that object? Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, cheresh, shote, vikatan. If you have a cheresh, or a shote, or a katan, שעשו בשבת מעצמם מלאכה האסורה מן התורה, that they went and they themselves went ahead and they did a prohibited labor on Shabbat, which is from the Torah. אם עשו לצורך אחר, if they did it for other people, אסור ליהנות ממה שעשו בשבת עצמה. They're not allowed to benefit from this that they did on Shabbat itself. Now, Ve'av b'motzi Shabbat, and even after Shabbat, tzarich lamtin ad sheyavor shur zman b'kedei sheyasu. You need to wait until the amount of time is going to pass of b'kedei sheyasu. Now I'm going to explain to you what that means. We did it before. We'll do it again. Not a big deal. But Rabotai, what just happened over here? Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, if you have a cheresh, shote, v'katan, they went ahead and on Shabbat itself, they went ahead and they did a malacha from the Torah. But they did it from their own initiative. You didn't tell them anything. Says Rav David Yosef Shlita, if they did it for other people, Asur lehenot mema shasu b'Shabbat atzma. You're not allowed to benefit from this that they did on Shabbat itself. You can't benefit from it at all on Shabbat. However, what about after Shabbat? Ve'av b'motzi Shabbat tzarich lamtin ad sheyavor shiur zman b'kedei sheyasu. Even after Shabbat, we're not going to allow you to benefit from it right away. You're going to have to wait the amount of time that it took the shote, cheresh, or katan to go ahead and do what you're about to benefit from. For example, let's say you had a cheresh, shote, or katan. They went there and they went there and they made you a nice piece of steak. How long does it take to fry a steak? Say 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Let's go 30 minutes, for example. So they come to you and say, here, this is for you. On Shabbat itself, you're not allowed to benefit from it. Done. There's no exceptions, Rabotai. Nobody's allowed to benefit from it on Shabbat. However, after Shabbat, here we go. We're going to say, since it was done for other people, you have to wait the amount of time that it took him to make that steak on Shabbat. So therefore comes out, if he took him 30 minutes, you have to wait 30 minutes after Shabbat before you can even benefit from that steak. That's what's called b'kedei sheyasu. The amount of time that it took the person to go ahead and make that steak or bake that steak or fry that steak or anything else. Doesn't only have to be food, it could be anything else, Rabotai. Give another example. A child, you had a shote or you had a cheresh. Rabotai, the difference is between a cheresh and a shote, they're adults. A katan is a minor. So let's say you had a person who's a deaf mute, an uncle or somebody, but he knows mechanics. So your car was broken, it was in the garage, it was broken. So he went and he had nothing to do, he went and he fixed the car for you. Your car, he went and he fixed it for you. It took about 4 hours to do it on Shabbat. He comes to you, he says, here's your keys, go start the engine, it's perfectly fine. You're not allowed to benefit from that car after Shabbat until you have waited 4 hours, because that's how long it took him to fix that car. That's what means b'kedei sheyasu. You gotta wait the amount of time that it took them to do that work whatever they were doing. Okay, Rabotai, so let's see that one more time. Very important halakha. Guys, pay close attention. Even a katan, even if a child, people ask, Rabbi, what happens if my child turned on the light? What if my child turned on the stove? What happens if my child poured water into the urn? Rabotai, asur. Here we go. Cherish shote vikatan. If you have a deaf mute, a deranged child, and a minor, shasu b'Shabbat me'atzmam. They did on Shabbat by themselves. Malacha hasur min Torah. They did a prohibited labor, which is prohibited from the Torah. Im asur letzorach, if they did it for the sake of other people, asur lehenod mimasha asur b'Shabbat asma. You're not allowed to benefit from this, what they did on Shabbat. On Shabbat itself, you're not allowed to benefit from that object, what came as a result of the desecration of Shabbat. Even after Shabbat, you gotta wait until the time of Kadesh Yasu passes. Continues Rav David Yosef. What happens if you commanded them knowingly, intentionally, to go ahead and do for you malacha on Shabbat? Okay, go on, for example, he says, Shitzivaha alehem livashel b'Shabbat. You commanded them to go ahead and cook on Shabbat. Asur leoto shitzivaha alehem lasot ken le'echol me'ototav shel olam. It is prohibited for that person that commanded either the cherish, the shota, or the katan to go ahead and cook on Shabbat. He's never allowed to eat that food. Rabotai, asur leoto shitziva alehem lasot. It is forbidden for that person that commanded them to do lasot ken, to do so. Le'echol me'oto tavshil olam, to eat from that tavshil, from that cooked food forever. So therefore, if you have a parent that thought he could outdo the system, and he told his child, go make me a hot cup of water or tea, or cook me this, do that, or do me laundry, whatever it might be, right? You think they're minors, what do you care? Rabotai, you are not allowed to benefit. Since you commanded, you could never ever go ahead and benefit from that item or from that object which came as a result of the desecration of Shabbat. Rabotai, look how severe this is. This is serious stuff. Continues Rav David Yosef, and now he's going to say, what happens if you have a cherish, shota, or the katan? They did a malakha for themselves on Shabbat. V'im as'u cherish, shota, v'katan malakha b'Shabbat l'tzorech atzmam. What happens if you have a cherish, shota, and a katan that they went there and they did the malakha on Shabbat for the sake of themselves? Yesh lahakel lishtamesh ulehanot b'ma she'atzu afil b'Shabbat atzma. You are able to be lenient and use and benefit from this that they did on Shabbat, even on Shabbat itself. Says Rav David Yosef a very big chiddush. Va'afilu kisheoto shemishtamesh v'nehena memalachtam makiram. Even that person that's using and benefit from their prohibited labor on Shabbat, he recognizes the child. Still, Rav David Yosef is going to tell you, you are allowed to go ahead and you are allowed to use it. This is according to the lenient opinion. You have those opinions that are stringent in this regard when it comes to a cherish and a shoteh, but not in regards to a minor. Even if the cherish and the shoteh, they did this malakha on Shabbat for the sake of themselves, and even if they did it by accident, it is forbidden for you to use that malakha, meaning it is forbidden for you to benefit from that malakha on Shabbat itself, meaning you can't use what came as a result of the desecration of Shabbat. Because remember, Rabotai, the rule is you should not benefit from any malakha, any prohibited labor which was done on Shabbat. So that's why, Rabotai, you do have stringent opinions when it comes to a cherish and a shoteh, that even if they did it for themselves, even if they did it by accident, you're not allowed to go ahead and use what came as a result of a desecration of Shabbat. Says Rav David Yosef, V'cheresh ha'amur kan, this cheresh, this deaf mute that we're speaking about in our situation, ha'inu cheresh she'enu shomeya, we're dealing with a cheresh, a deaf person who does not hear, ve'enu midaber, and he does not speak. So basically this cheresh is a deaf mute. Ubizmanenu sha'hachereshim ilimim, in our times where you have deaf people that are mute, lomdim bebeit sever miyuchad, they learn in a special institution. V'yodeim u'mevinim ka'anashim reglim, they know and they understand like regular people. Ledat rabim mehaposkim, according to many poskim, dinam, their law is going to be kidin shar Yisrael, like any other Jew. V'dinam li'inil maseh Shabbat, and their law is going to be in regards to desecrating Shabbat, kidin sha'ar Yehudi shasam malacha asur b'Shabbat, like the law of any other Jew that went ahead and he did a prohibited malacha on Shabbat. Shinit ba'er la'el, like we explained above. Rabotai, Rav David Yosef Shutai Sang is like this. When you're dealing today with people that are cheresh, meaning they're deaf and mute, since they learn in special schools where they teach them how to think and understand, and they know what's going on, we're going to tell you that their law is no different than any other Jew. So therefore, Rabotai, if they went ahead and they did a malacha on Shabbat, we're going to tell you that the law is going to be exactly like a regular Jew that went ahead and he did malacha on Shabbat, like it was explained above. Okay, now Rabotai, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do a review, and Bezrat Hashem, with that we're going to conclude. What is Maaseh Shabbat? Maaseh Shabbat is something produced or fixed through forbidden malacha done on Shabbat. Is one allowed to benefit from Maaseh Shabbat for the sake of a mitzvah? There is a dispute. Some permit it because mitzvot lav lehenot nitnu, mitzvah were not given for personal enjoyment. Others forbid even for mitzvah purposes. The lenient opinion has what to rely on. According to the lenient opinion, may one use something fixed on Shabbat for a rabbinic mitzvah? Yes, even if the mitzvah is only midrabanan, you would be allowed to go ahead and use it on Shabbat, even though it came through an act of desecration of Shabbat. If a mistake was found in a Sefer Torah and it was corrected on Shabbat, may one read from it. One who is lenient and reads from it has what to rely on. If electricity was repaired on Shabbat, may one learn Torah by that light. The lenient opinion permits learning Torah or reading Shnai Mikra Targum using that electricity. May one learn from Sepharim printed on Shabbat. One who is lenient has what to rely on. Maaseh Shabbat done for weekday purposes. If someone performed a Torah prohibition on Shabbat by mistake for weekday needs, when may benefit be taken? It is forbidden until after Shabbat, both for the person himself and for others. If the malacha was done intentionally, b'mezid, what is the law? For the person who did it, forbidden forever. For others, permitted after Shabbat. What if a habitual Shabbat violator did malacha for others? That item remains forbidden forever, even for others after Shabbat. In regards to Maaseh Shabbat of a cheresh, shot, of a katan, if a shoteh, cheresh, or katan independently did forbidden malacha for others on Shabbat, may others benefit? No, it is forbidden on Shabbat, and after Shabbat one must wait b'kedei sheyasu. What is b'kedei sheyasu? The amount of time it would normally take to perform that malacha after Shabbat. If someone intentionally instructed a katan or similarly a person to cook on Shabbat, may he ever eat the food? No. it is forbidden to him forever. If a katan did malacha for his own benefit, may others benefit from it. Yes, one may be lenient even on Shabbat itself. Is there any stricter opinion regarding a cherish or a shoteh? Yes, some are strict that even if they did the malacha for themselves and accidentally, one may not benefit on Shabbat itself. Does the stricter opinion also apply to a katan? No. The stringency mentioned is only regarding cherish and a shoteh. Which cherish is discussed here? A deaf mute who neither hears nor speaks. What is the status today of deaf individuals educated in modern schools? Many poskim rule they are considered like regular Jews regarding halakha. According to many modern poskim, if such a deaf person performs forbidden malacha on Shabbat, what is his status? The same as any other Jew who violated Shabbat. Now, Rabotai, we did see in the beginning of the classes all the laws where a regular Jew desecrates Shabbat. There are very big differences if he did it by accident, if he did it intentional, and so on and so forth. We have this Rabotai in the beginning of the classes. You can always go back and look it up there. Have a great day. Baruch Adonai L'Olam. Amen. Ve'amen.